Liberal calculus professor tries to embarrass Elon Musk, unaware he's a math genius. Professor Linda Martinez smoothed the wrinkles from her charcoal blazer as she gazed out at the lecture hall filled with students. Her fingers, thin and strong from decades of chalking equations across blackboards, trembled slightly. This wasn't just another Monday morning advanced calculus class. Today's lecture had been meticulously planned for weeks, an analytical deconstruction of what she considered America's most dangerous myth, the self-made tech genius. The autumn light filtered through tall windows, casting long rectangles across the worn wooden floor of Princeton's mathematics building. Linda had walked these halls for 23 years, building her reputation equation by equation, proof by proof. The daughter of a migrant worker father and a mother who cleaned university dormitories, she had fought for every opportunity. Her PhD from Cambridge, her tenure, her published papers, nothing had come easily. Perhaps that's why the narrative of the billionaire genius particularly bothered her. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying to the back row with practiced authority. "Today, we're examining the mathematics of probability and privilege through the lens of contemporary success stories." She clicked to her first slide, a familiar face with a slight smirk that seemed to mock her from the screen. Elon Musk. We're told he's a mathematical prodigy, a visionary, but what if we apply actual mathematical analysis to separate myth from reality? From the back of the lecture hall, a man shifted in his seat. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, thick-rimmed glasses, and a nondescript gray sweatshirt. He hadn't been in class before today. The casual observer might have missed him entirely, just another audit student, perhaps. He hunched slightly, tapping notes into his phone. Linda didn't notice him. She was too focused on her carefully constructed argument, the probability calculations showing how inherited advantage compounds, how patterns of investment favor those already within privileged networks, how the mythology of the lone genius obscures the labor of thousands. Elon Musk's understanding of mathematics is primarily practical, not theoretical, she continued. Yet the media portrays him as some kind of modern-day Einstein. To illustrate the gap between applied engineering and true mathematical brilliance, I've prepared a challenge. She turned to the whiteboard and began writing. Her chalk strokes were precise, almost elegant, as a complex partial differential equation took shape. It was a particularly thorny problem involving thermodynamics, quantum states, and calculus of variations, something that would challenge even her graduate students. This is the kind of problem that separates those who merely apply mathematics from those who truly understand its underlying beauty and structure, she explained. Someone like Musk might recognize its application to heat distribution in battery systems, but would struggle with the pure theory. A hand raised slowly from the back row. "Yes?" Linda acknowledged, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "I believe there's an approach using Hamiltonian mechanics that might simplify this considerably," came a voice with a distinct South African accent. The classroom fell silent. Linda squinted toward the back row. "Would you like to elaborate?" she challenged me. The man stood, removing his cap and glasses as he walked to the front of the room. A ripple of recognition spread through the students, followed by the unmistakable sound of dozens of phones being hastily retrieved to document the moment. "I'm Elon Musk," he said simply, taking the chalk from her stunned fingers. "And I'd be happy to work through this." Linda's face drained of color as he turned to the board. With swift, confident strokes, he began working through the equation, narrating his process with a surprisingly soft-spoken thoroughness. He applied techniques from various branches of mathematics, demonstrating not just familiarity but mastery. "You've constructed an elegant problem," he acknowledged as he finished, "but it's solvable with the right approach." He handed her back the chalk, their fingers brushing in a moment that seemed to Linda both endless and infinitesimal. The silence in the room was absolute. Linda found herself facing not just a man, but the collapse of her carefully constructed narrative. 23 years of academic rigor had taught her one unassailable truth: evidence matters more than ideology. "That's," she began, then cleared her throat. "That's correct." A student's voice broke the tension. "Professor Martinez, did you know he would be here?" "No," she answered honestly. "I did not." Musk shrugged, a gesture somehow both modest and challenging. "I make a habit of attending lectures where I'm the subject. Helps me understand different perspectives." He turned to Linda. "I particularly wanted to hear yours. Your paper on multivariable applications in climate modeling was brilliant." Linda blinked in surprise. "You've read my work?" "All of it," he replied, "including your criticism of my companies. Much of it is valid, though I think you underestimate the mathematical complexity of practical engineering problems." What followed was no longer a lecture, but a dialogue. Tense at first, then increasingly engaged. As students watched in fascination, Linda and Musk debated mathematical theory, application, privilege, and responsibility. He acknowledged advantages he'd had. She conceded the genuine innovation behind some of his achievements. "The problem with your probability model," Musk said at one point, "is that it treats success as a single event rather than a complex system of decisions made under uncertainty. A better approach would be a Bayesian network with—" He stopped to sketch a diagram that looked remarkably like neural pathways. "Something like this." Linda found herself nodding. "A dynamic rather than static model," she agreed, then frowned. "But this still doesn't account for the initial conditions." "True," he acknowledged. "And those matter enormously." By the time the class period ended, something had shifted. The students filed out buzzing with excitement, many lingering to capture final photos or ask questions. Neither Linda nor Musk noticed the small drone that had hovered near the ceiling for the last 15 minutes of class, operated by a student journalist who recognized the viral potential of the encounter. By evening, clips of the lecture were spreading across every platform. Mad Musk vs. Martinez was trending nationally, with commentators from across the political spectrum spinning the encounter to fit their preferred narratives. Linda discovered this when her phone began vibrating incessantly during dinner at her modest Princeton apartment. "You need to see this," said her wife, Caroline, an English literature professor, turning her laptop screen to show Linda the footage. "Oh God," Linda whispered, watching herself on screen. The video had been edited to emphasize the confrontational aspects, minimizing the substantive discussion that followed. Her university email inbox filled with messages, some supportive, others viciously critical. The university president's office requested a meeting first thing tomorrow. Conservative pundits were already calling for her resignation. Progressive academics were defensively dismissing Musk's mathematical abilities as a lucky performance. Neither position reflected what had actually happened in that classroom. Something far more complex and human had occurred, something that defied the binary narratives both sides were constructing. At 9:17 p.m., her phone rang with an unknown number. "Dr. Martinez, it's Elon Musk." She nearly dropped the phone. "How did you get this number?" "That's not the important question right now," he replied. "Have you seen the videos?" "Yes. They're misrepresenting what happened." His voice was tight with controlled anger. "Both sides are using us as proxies for their culture war." Linda sat heavily on her sofa. "What do you suggest?" "Meet me tomorrow, before your meeting with President Watkins. We need to get ahead of this narrative." Linda considered her options. Her academic reputation, built over decades, was at stake. The carefully maintained barrier between her professional and personal politics had been shattered. Yet she couldn't deny the genuine intellectual exchange that had occurred. 7 a.m., the mathematics library, third floor study room, she said finally. "I'll be there." The mathematics library was silent at 7 in the morning, dust motes dancing in shafts of early light. Linda arrived first, spreading her notes across the heavy oak table. She had slept poorly, her dreams filled with equations that morphed into social media icons and then into faces shouting silently at her. Musk arrived precisely on time, carrying coffee for both of them. He looked tired but alert. "Black with 1 sugar, right?" he said, setting a cup before her. "How did you know? You mentioned it in your 2018 interview with MIT Technology Review." Linda took a cautious sip. "You really have read everything. I'm thorough." He sat across from her, especially regarding critics with valid points. For the next hour, they drafted a joint statement. It acknowledged their differing perspectives while emphasizing their shared respect for mathematical truth and open dialogue. They agreed to participate in a public conversation at the university, moderated by a respected neutral academic. When they walked together to the president's office, reporters had already gathered outside the administration building. Camera flashes exploded as they approached. "Just follow my lead," Musk murmured. "I've done this before." President Watkins, a political scientist with a diplomat's smoothness, was visibly relieved by their unified approach. The board was concerned about potential damage to the university's reputation, she admitted. This joint initiative transforms a potential scandal into an educational opportunity. The press conference that followed was brief but effective. Standing side by side at the podium, they refused to be cast as enemies. "What happened yesterday wasn't a takedown or a win," Linda told the reporters. "It was what universities are supposed to foster, the clash of ideas, followed by synthesis." Musk nodded. "Dr. Martinez and I disagree on many things, but we both believe in mathematics as a language of truth, and we both understand that complex problems require diverse perspectives." A reporter shouted, "But Dr. Martinez, don't you believe billionaires like Mr. Musk represent systemic inequality?" Linda felt the trap being laid, the demand that she perform ideological purity. She chose her words carefully. "I believe systems of privilege exist and must be examined critically. I also believe individuals can demonstrate genuine brilliance while benefiting from those systems. The mathematics of this isn't binary, it's multivariate." Later, as they walked back across campus, Musk made an unexpected proposal. "I'd like you to visit one of my research facilities. There's a project where your theoretical work might have practical applications." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Is this a PR move?" "It's an engineering problem," he replied. "One that needs your particular mathematical approach." 3 weeks later, Linda stood in a vast laboratory in Northern California, surrounded by some of the most advanced technology in the world. Caroline had accompanied her, partly out of curiosity and partly out of lingering suspicion about Musk's motives. "These are the simulation results using traditional approaches," said Dr. Helen Shaw, the project lead, indicating complex visualizations hovering in the air. "And these are the results when we apply Dr. Martinez's equations." The difference was striking. The second model showed significantly improved efficiency patterns. "What exactly am I looking at?" Linda asked. "Carbon capture technology," Musk explained, entering the room. "Your equations for modeling turbulent flow in dynamic systems turned out to be perfect for optimizing our atmospheric processing units." Linda moved closer to the display, her academic interest fully engaged. "You've modified the boundary conditions." "We had to," Helen explained. "The real-world constraints required some adaptations." For the next several hours, Linda immersed herself in the project, suggesting refinements that the engineers immediately began testing. Caroline watched her wife with a mixture of pride and amusement. Linda, in her element, had always been a force of nature, political considerations temporarily set aside in the pursuit of mathematical elegance. During a break, Musk led them to a small courtyard where lunch had been arranged. As they ate, he explained how the project had begun as part of his Mars habitation research, but had evolved into a potential solution for Earth's climate crisis. "The irony isn't lost on me," he admitted. "Developing technology for another planet might help save this one." "Why my equations?" Linda asked directly. "There are other mathematicians working in this field." Musk considered the question. "Because you approach problems from fundamentally different assumptions than my team, we needed that perspective." He paused. "And perhaps I wanted to prove that I really had read your work." Caroline laughed. "He's still trying to win the argument from your classroom." "It wasn't an argument," Linda corrected. "It was a recalibration." By the end of the visit, Linda had agreed to consult on the project. What began as a single consultation evolved into an ongoing collaboration, with Linda traveling to California every few months while maintaining her teaching position. The university, recognizing the potential prestige and research opportunities, granted her flexible scheduling. Their unusual partnership didn't go unnoticed. Their joint public conversation at Princeton had drawn national attention, with unexpected consequences. Students reported increased interest in advanced mathematics. Several tech companies established new diversity initiatives for recruiting theoretical mathematicians from underrepresented backgrounds. Not everyone approved, of course. Linda received angry emails from former allies who viewed her collaboration as a betrayal of political principles. Musk faced criticism from shareholders concerned about the project's immediate profitability. Both found themselves increasingly unconcerned with these reactions. 6 months into their collaboration, Linda noticed discrepancies in their research data. Small but significant details from their models were appearing in a competitor's publications, too specific to be coincidental. "We have a leak," she told Musk during a secure video call from her Princeton office. "Are you sure? The mathematical signature is clear. These aren't independent discoveries." An investigation revealed the probable source, Professor James Hammond, a visiting scholar from Cambridge, who had been granted limited access to Linda's research as a professional courtesy. Hammond had connections to foreign technology interests that raised serious concerns. Rather than confronting him directly, Linda and Musk devised a mathematical trap, embedding a subtle but traceable error into specific documents that Hammond could access. When the same distinctive error appeared in a paper published just weeks later, they had their proof. The university's security team, working with federal authorities, confirmed their suspicions. Hammond was quietly removed from campus, later facing charges related to intellectual property theft. The case never made headlines, but it strengthened the unlikely bond between Linda and Musk, a shared understanding that their work had value worth protecting. On a crisp autumn day, 1 year after their first encounter, Linda stood again before her advanced calculus class. The lecture hall was filled beyond capacity, students sitting in aisles and standing along the back wall. The university had been forced to create a lottery system for enrollment. "Today we're examining the mathematics of collaborative systems," she began, conscious of how much had changed in 12 months. Specifically, how different mathematical approaches can complement each other to solve problems that neither could address independently. On the screen behind her appeared complex visualizations from their carbon capture project, now in preliminary testing at 3 sites globally. Initial results showed promise far beyond previous technologies. "The equations we'll explore today represent more than abstract theory," she continued. "They demonstrate how pure mathematics can translate into real-world applications, sometimes in unexpected ways." From the back of the room, a familiar figure nodded. Musk no longer needed a disguise. His regular presence on campus had become unremarkable, just another element of Princeton's academic ecosystem. He attended her lectures when his schedule permitted, occasionally contributing but mostly listening with respectful attention. After class, they walked together toward the mathematics library, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. Students nodded respectfully as they passed, no longer seeing them as symbols in a cultural divide, but as collaborators in a complex intellectual enterprise. "The department approved my new course for next semester," Linda said, "Applied Theory in Environmental Systems. Will you include our case study?" "Anonymized, but yes." She smiled slightly. "It makes for a compelling narrative arc." "Speaking of narratives," Musk said, "have you seen the latest from the White House? They're expressing interest in our technology for their climate initiative." Linda shook her head. "A year ago, I would have said you were the last person they'd partner with. And you were the last person I expected to be working with," he countered. "Yet here we are." They reached the library steps and paused. Around them, the campus continued its eternal rhythms, students rushing to classes, tour groups admiring historic buildings, researchers lost in thought as they traversed well-worn paths. "Do you ever regret it?" Musk asked suddenly. "That day in your classroom?" Linda considered the question carefully, the mathematician that she was. "I regret my assumptions," she said finally, "not the outcome." He nodded, understanding the precise calibration of her answer. "The new simulations will be ready next week," he said, preparing to leave. "I'll have my analysis ready by Thursday." It wasn't friendship exactly. Their differences remained substantial. It wasn't quite a partnership either, though they worked together effectively. What they had built was something mathematics itself might struggle to define, a connection based on mutual respect for complexity, an appreciation for problems too important to sacrifice to ideological simplicity, and the recognition that the most elegant solutions often emerge from the most unlikely combinations. In the end, perhaps that was the most important equation of all.